Right, welcome to second level macro ECS. Today we're just gonna finish up on learning unit number 2, which is basically about the goods market, right? A conclusion about the goods market. So what have we learned so far about the goods market? For starters, there is a separation between the goods market and the financial market, right? So in the goods market, we had this diagram here, this diagram here, which basically represented consumption on the y-axis and then GDP or income on the x-axis there. So what we learned was your consumption can be given an equation, right? Your consumption curve can basically be given as an equation, right? And then drawn as a straight line, the way it's indicated there, and it's given as the ZZ curve, right? So where that ZZ curve intersects the y-axis, which is basically called the y-intercept, would basically refer to that point there as an autonomous expenditures, right, or autonomous consumptions, type of consumptions, but rightly to be called autonomous expenditures, since they can include a whole host of things there. And then we say if any one of those autonomous expenditures increase, which they normally include, say, autonomous consumption, investment spending, which can also, and then we can also have government spending there, and then exports and imports there, which is net exports, the difference between those two. So if any of those increases or decreases, it's gonna basically cause a shift in that graph there. So it's either gonna go up or go down. So for instance, if your net exports increase, then you would see a movement that is similar to that change there from 960 to 1,000. So same as your government expenditure, if it goes up. And then again, if your investment expenditure goes up, so you expect an upward shift there, right? And then that y is equal to z there is the line of equilibrium there. So where your graph basically crosses that line is going to give you equilibrium income at that point, right? So you can see that when the graph shifts up, the equilibrium income is supposed to go up, like in this case, moved up from 4,800 to 5,000. So any policy, any government policy that can basically cause a shift in that, say an upward shift in that ZZ curve, basically meant to increase your equilibrium income, like in the case from 4,800 to 5,000 there in that illustration. Right. And then another point to remember there is the chain of events after a decrease in taxation, where when your taxation goes up, it directly affects your disposable income, which is written there as YD. How does it do that? It increases. Therefore, when your disposable income goes up, then your total consumption is going to go up. Then this is going to be shown there as your expenditure going up, which is Z curve there. And then overall, your Y, or which is your equilibrium income, is supposed to go up. That's the indication there. So we are going to talk about expansionary policy now, expansionary fiscal policy in particular. So expansionary fiscal policy deals with level and also deals with the composition of government expenditure or government spending, and as well as taxes, of course. So you find both of those in the fiscal policy. So once you are asked about the fiscal policy, then think about government, so the budget speech, where we discuss taxes and we also discuss government spending. How much are you going to spend and where are you going to spend, right? That's what we call fiscal policy. So an expansionary fiscal policy basically means either your government spending is increased or it means your taxes are lowered. So both of which are going to have this effect here, an expansionary fiscal policy. The effect is going to be an upward increase there, right? And then remember at this point that if you are going to be adjusting your taxes, if your taxes, for instance, are going down, which is an expansionary fiscal policy, then you want to factor in the marginal propensity to consume, right? Which we introduced on our last session. We said it basically shows that you are not consuming 100% of your income. So it's a proportion of the income that you are consuming, the proportion of your income that you are consuming. So if say you're going to be earning 1,000 rand and you consume 800 rand, it's because of the marginal propensity to consume, right? Which we can assume at that point it will be 0.8, right? And then again, we spoke about how to find the equilibrium income, basically using calculation. So we said you first of all need to find your marginal propensity to save. So what is marginal propensity to save? It's 1 minus your marginal propensity to consume, right? Those amounts, they are complementary, they both add up to 1. Like your marginal propensity to consume and your marginal propensity to save. So you add them up, you're always going to get the 1. So to get the other, then you deduct 1 from the other, or you deduct the other from 1. So once you get your marginal propensity to save, then 1 divided by your marginal propensity to save will give you what we call the multiplier. So you take that multiplier and then you multiply it by all the autonomous portions there of your equation. So which is going to be your investment, it's going to be your autonomous consumption, it's going to be your government spending, and then your taxes also, and then it's going to be again your net export. So you can put that there, right? And then speaking of net exports, maybe I should introduce something here, a new equation, if they put it up here, to factor in the marginal propensity to import. But I haven't quite seen it here. It's only on second level. Not second level, sorry, first level. All right, so since it's not there, I'm just gonna give it to you. So it's just gonna, where it's 1 minus, 1 divided by 1 minus C. So if you're gonna factor in the foreign sector, there is gonna be 1 minus C, which is your MPS, and then you add your M. That is if you are given your marginal propensity to import. So it's unlikely that you are gonna be given that anyway. That's for first levels. And then the last issue that I'll bring about here is the issue of a balanced budget. It's the issue of a balanced budget. So what happens when there is a balanced budget? It's part of it's some of those questions that you saw on the assignment where we say you increase your government spending by 300 and then you increase your taxes by 300. What's the net effect of that? You see, so which is basically kind of a combination of expansionary fiscal policy and the contractionary fiscal policy. So contractionary fiscal policy is when, in this instance, when your taxes are being increased. So you are increasing spending and increasing your, then on the other side, increasing your taxes. So what is the net effect of that? That's what we call a balanced budget multiplier. So when we are dealing with that now, know that if you're going to increase, for instance, your taxes by, so let's start with your government spending. If you increase your government spending by 300, your taxes increase by 300, then the net effect of that should be an increase of 300 all the time. So how do we get that? So here we're talking about the net effect on equilibrium income. Right? So keep in mind how to find equilibrium income. You multiply that autonomous portion of spending by the multiplier, right? You multiply it by the result of 1 divided by marginal propensity to save, right? So in this instance now, you are basically going to be multiplying, right? You are basically going to be multiplying that increase in government expenditure, and then you get a certain amount, and then because your taxes are going up again, which is a reduction, then the answer that you get now, you need to minus the multiplier times your taxes, so which is going to be 300, but you adjust your taxes now by your marginal propensity to consume, which we already spoke about in the previous session. So the result will always be a net increase by the initial amount that was pumped in, right? All right, so I think that's just about it on that. So the rest of this, you can just read through, right? You can just read through on that. All right, so, all right, I'm gonna leave all this here for you to go through, all that there for you to go through. So just go through those questions, because it's highly likely that when they give multiple choice questions, they're gonna be from that day. All right, they're most likely gonna be that day. All right, so now we are on the financial market, which is learning unit number 3, the financial market. So we are gonna start off by discussing, say, the demand for money, right? The demand for money, so which is also revision from first year. All right, so money, there are basically 3 reasons why a person could demand money. So it can either be demanded for transactional purposes, or precautionary purposes, or for passive purposes, which is speculative purposes, like in this instance here. I think it's the first one that, oh, okay. Right, they start off with the demand for active balances. So active balances, we are talking about for transaction purposes, right? The money that you demand for transaction purposes. So that money which is demanded for transaction purposes has a certain relationship with your income, right? It has a certain relationship with your income. Right, so what kind of relationship does that have? It has a positive relationship with your income. So in other words, we can reasonably expect that once your income goes up, then your demand for active balances shall go up as well, assuming that you are going to be engaging in more transactions, right, as a result of your increase in income. But if you look at now speculative purposes, now we are looking at the investment aspect. Say you are going to be choosing now between bonds. They normally juxtapose this with the bond market, where you are either keeping your money as money, or you decide to buy bonds with your money. So this is under the assumption that there are only 2 kinds of assets in the market. So one of which is going to be bonds, then the other is going to be money. So we are saying you can either keep your assets as money in the form of money, or keep your assets in the form of bonds, right? So it's either of those options there. So which means that one is basically going to be strongly influenced by the interest rates, right? It's going to be strongly influenced by the interest rate. So meaning, if the interest rates in the bond market are paying well, which is a high interest rate, then we expect that you're going to take a portion of your money, right, and then you stop keeping it as money, you instead go and invest it in the bond market. So hence, there's going to be an inverse relationship between your demand for money as well, so your demand for money against your interest rate, right? If you're going to be juxtaposing that against the interest rate, for the reason that I mentioned, that whenever the interest rate is high, the demand for money will have to be low, because you are taking most of your money to the bond market. So that's the reason for that now. So that's what's given there in terms of the chain of events there. So whenever the interest rate is high, your passive demand for money is going to go low, and then the opposite is going to hold true there. All right, so if you check that on first level, there's going to be a graphical presentation there, right? There will be a graphical presentation on that. All right, so that graphical presentation is going to show a negative relationship there. All right, so this is it actually, yeah, the demand for money diagram. So you can see there, when the interest rate is high, which is on I2, your demand for money is going to be on M2, which is quite low. And then once it goes down, then it shifts to M1, and then it can be looked at also in the opposite direction. All right.
Hi. Can you just maybe explain, because I think it confuses me a bit there, when it says interest, like maybe put it in the reality world. Or like, for instance, now the interest rates are high. So does it mean that people don't want, people are not demanding money? Like, I don't understand how, like, when you put it in practical, how is it? Because I would literally think that when interest rates are higher, it means that there's less money and people will want more money.
Okay, but the reason why it's true that when the interest rates are high, there is less money. But the reason why there is less money, we can first of all, now because we are dealing with the money market, I'll just explain why there is less money in the money market, right? Since we are dealing with the demand for money here. Right. So the reason why there's going to be less money in the market, remember I said for starters, we are assuming that there are two assets in the market. So the two assets are bonds and money. So you're looking at money as an asset. So if you have got extra cash, let's say we're dealing with a situation where you have got extra cash, extra money. What would you do if the interest rates are high? Would you rather keep your money as money, or would you take your money to the bond market, which pays a better interest? Remember that if you've got money in your mattress, it's not going to give you a return, you see. So which is why we say the demand for money is going to be low. So we are saying the demand for keeping your wealth as money, right, instead of bonds, it's going to be low. So we are assuming just two assets there. So if the interest rate is high, then you will take the extra money that you keep in the mattress to the bank, right? It's going to give you a good, or to the bond market, because it's going to give you an interest. It's going to give you a return, right? But if it's low, then you are willing to keep more money in the mattress because you're like, well, I might as well keep the money. There are some instances where these interest rates get up to 0, right? So when it's 0, then what's the point of buying bonds? So bear in mind that if you're going to buy bonds, there's a slight inconvenience if you want to use that money. You can't just go and take the money off the bond market within a minute and then start using it, you see. So which is why now, before you buy bonds, you need to consider. So you need to be convinced now to convert your money to bonds. How are you convinced? It's when the interest rates are high. So the interest rates simply means that there's a bigger return for your money if you convert it into bonds. Is it getting better there?
Yes, it is. I think you really answered me because it was confusing me a bit on how to read it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You only consider yourself as a person that has extra cash. So when we talk of demand for money, we are not talking about you wanting a salary increase, something like that. No, it's not precisely. It's not that, right? It's not that. We are basically talking about you keeping your money as cash in the bedroom. You see, so when there is a 0% interest, then you'd rather keep your money. So keep your money in the bedroom because it doesn't help to take it to the bond market. But when it's high now, then you are going to hold less cash and take your money to the bond market. And then the other reason why, all right. Then the other reason why the money is going to be small, we don't look at it now in terms of demand for money. We look at it when we're dealing with the supply for money. Other circumstances why the quantity of money can reduce as a result of interest rates. All right. Then that shift down, and then that shift down on that graph from MD1 to MD2, which is the demand there, is the one that we're talking about now when we're saying if your demand for active balances go up, what happens there on that curve? So it results in a rightward shift, right? So here we are now dealing with income, right? This is the point where we deal with income, where we say when people's incomes go up, what happens to their demands for money? Their demands for money go up. So how do they go up? They are not affected by interest rates. Hence, these ones become a shift there. So now we are looking at demand for money for transactional purposes there. So we must be able now to distinguish between the two, right, whenever we come across them. So a person's demand for money is affected by interest rates negative for the reason that we mentioned there. But what kind of demand? We said its demand for speculative purposes, right? So this is the instance where you are holding money as a form of investment, as an asset, right? This one is going to be negatively related with the interest rate. And then there's a demand for money now that is basically affected by your income. So this one has a positive relationship with your income. So when your income increases, that one also increases. So if you want to illustrate that now in that graph, in the IM graph, because we're not plotting income, it becomes an exogenous vector. So it can either shift the graph to the left or to the right. So if there's a decrease in incomes, it's going to shift to the left. Then an increase in incomes, it will have to shift to the right. All right, so that's the illustration right there. All right, so here are the relationships there. So when your Y representative of income there, when it goes down, then your demand for money is also going to go down. Then when it goes up, your demand for money is going to go up. And then the interest rates, there's the negative relationship. You see when the interest rate is going down, your demand for money is going up. And then when the interest rate is going up, demand for money is going down. That's the relationship that's given there. Right, so there are two things now that can happen in terms of in our determination of money, particularly money supply, right? Particularly money supply. So it can either be determined exogenously or endogenously, right? So let's just start it off with all right, let's start it off from the top there. The prescribed book uses both endogenously and exogenously determined money approaches, right? In order to be consistent, we have used the endogenous approach, so which is the one that we do here throughout the study guide. So it's the one that we are following here. All right, so what's the assumption there between the two? Just to cut that long story short there. So if something is endogenously determined, we are basically meaning to say it's determined within the model, right? Within the model. So in this instance, if money is endogenously determined, we're basically meaning it's determined by demand there. So in other words, our quantity of money is basically determined by our demand for money. So it can either go up and down. You see, so this is unlike a situation where if it's exogenously determined, it's basically imposed on us. So that's the situation that you get maybe in countries like in the US there, where they can just vary the quantity of money. So graphically, it's going to be represented that way, where you basically can change the quantity of money. You actually determine the quantity of money and it's fixed, right? You say that money is at point M, and then the interest rates have to play along that, right? But here we are following the endogenously determined approach, right? So in other words, as money demand changes, so does the quantity of money. So it's different from saying the quantity of money is fixed, right? And then the interest rates need to adjust themselves to that. But here, we're basically saying interest rates can play around, and then as they play around, it affects the quantity of money. Okay. All right, so this one we already did, chain of events. When there is a change in the level of income, we said these ones are positively related. So at the end of the day, when your demand for money goes up, then your quantity of money goes up. So this is what we're talking about when we say this M there is determined by MD, which is the demand for money, right? So that's the one that we are following there. And then the interest rates and the quantity of money, this one we already covered, right? So because there is a negative relationship between interest rate and demand for money, then demand for money and quantity of money move in one direction. So let's say if your interest rates are going up, your demand for money is going to go down, then your quantity of money should go down. Then if your interest rates are going down, demand for money should go up, and then your quantity of money should go up as well. All right, and then what we have now in the financial markets, we have on the goods market, we have fiscal policy, here we have the monetary policy, right? Which can basically be expansionary or contractionary also, just the same as basically just the same as the fiscal policy, right? It can be addressed from both of those points, right? So who's in charge of monetary policy? This one here is within the ambit of the SARB, the Reserve Bank, right? So how does it work with us? Right. So in South Africa, the monetary policy is formulated and implemented by SARB, and the accommodation policy, also referred to as the refinancing of liquidity requirements, is an important instrument there. Right. And then it is through the accommodation policy that the Reserve Bank provides financing to banks that require money. But how does that work now? So the Reserve Bank controls the interest rates by using open market operations to adjust the money market deficit in order to influence the market interest rate. Right. So how does that work now? Let me just explain it and cut the long story short. So the Reserve Bank makes sure that banks always have a liquidity crisis. So in other words, they force banks into a liquidity crisis so that banks can come back and borrow that shortage there. Right? They've got quite a lot of requirements that at the end of the day, once followed, you will always have a liquidity crisis and you always have to go back to the Reserve Bank. So some of the characteristics of the Reserve Bank is that it's the lender of last resort, right? So when banks can't borrow from each other, they need to go now and borrow from the Reserve Bank. So when they borrow from the Reserve Bank, then they are going to be borrowing at what we call the repo rate, which is the repurchase rate there. So I think I was explaining this in the other class, how it works, but we don't really go into detail with this here, but you basically go and borrow money from the Reserve Bank at an agreed interest rate. So you repay it at a certain agreed date. But if you're borrowing money there, you are then going to be borrowing it maybe in the form of bonds, etc., right? Because it's debt. So you are basically borrowing it in the debt market from the Reserve Bank. So that interest rate there, which is the repo rate, is going to influence all other interest rates, because if the bank is borrowing, say, from the Reserve Bank at 5%, it doesn't make sense for them to, to re-lend you the money as a customer at 5% again. They need to put a markup, say, lend to you at 6%. So if the repo rate goes up, say from 5% to 6%, they also need to adjust the rate that they lend in the market. So this is how the repo rate is going to affect every other interest rate there. So which means when we talk of an increase in the interest rate, so that increase in the interest rate starts off in the financial markets. It starts off with the Reserve Bank, right? It basically starts off with the Reserve Bank. So whenever the interest rates are going up in the market, it's as a result of what is happening with this repo rate between the Reserve Bank and the other banks, right? So when we talk of an expansionary fiscal policy, you are going to be looking at a situation where you want your money to go up, right? You want your money to go up. So how do you go about that if you are the Reserve Bank? Since you can't directly influence people's incomes, you can basically influence people's demand for money through the interest rate. So we already saw the relationship there between the interest rates and the demand for money. So if you take down your interest rates, the demand for money is going to go, right? If you take down the interest rates, the demand for money is going to go up, and then hence the quantity of money is also going to go up. So which is basically going to translate into more activity in the market. Let's take, for instance, if you are a company and then the interest rates have gone down, basically means you can now go to the bank and borrow, right? You basically go to the bank and you borrow, and then you use that money to finance business activity. So it is expansionary in the correct sense. All right. So once that's the case now, then we can conclude that whenever you see, I think in our case now, the interest rates have been going up. So that's a contractionary fiscal policy. So that is meant to tone down economic level, right? Or economic activity. It's meant to tone it down a little bit. Okay, so that was that there. So the relationship is given there by chain of events. So the expansionary fiscal policy is when the interest rate is going up, so it's going down, and then the money demand is going up, and then the money at the end, the quantity of money goes up. And then the contractionary is doing the opposite of that, and which is what's happening now, an increase in the interest rates, which is then followed by a decrease in the demand for money, and then quantity of money is going down there.
Mm.
All right.
Can I
Yeah.
can I ask? Okay, this is like out of a personal, curiosity. Okay, so now, like for instance, right now, what's happening economically? We are struggling as a country, ne? But the repo rate keeps on going up. Why do they keep on taking it up, or else they can see that we are already struggling? Because if they want to tone down if they want to tone down the money level, already we don't have the money. Why do they keep on increasing it? What could be the reason for that? Thank you.
Okay, so the reason that they gave for that, if you look at how it progressed from 2020, economic levels were very low in 2020. And then their response was to take down the interest rates to try and boost economic levels. But the problem with that is once people are able to go to the banks and borrow money, it boosts spending, right? And once spending increases, the problem with that is the price levels are going to increase. You see, so which is what we've been experiencing again, inflation. If you look at what has been happening, particularly with these consumer products, they've been going up. Though some of the reasons were blamed on the war in Ukraine, etc. But whatever the reason is, when inflation is high, we also want to try and take down the inflation. So the definition of inflation now is when there's too much money in the market, but the goods haven't changed. The production hasn't increased. So it causes inflation. It causes the prices of those goods to rise. So now they are at a dilemma now, because the one problem that you are facing is inflation. And then the other problem that you are facing now is low economic growth. So you need to try and address the one that you feel is going to pinch, is going to be affecting people the most. So normally the Reserve Bank responds to inflation, right? So when this increase in the repo rate is a direct response to inflation. So they are trying to take down inflation. See, but at the same time, that has an effect, right? An opposite effect of that. It basically causes the income levels to go down. So it's not easy. It's not easy. So the best thing to do would probably be to have an expansionary fiscal policy coupled with a monetary policy that is contractional. That could help. You see. I hope that answers your question. But we are dealing with inflation now. That's why the rate is doing that. So they don't mind a few people suffering in the process, just to keep the inflation rates high. Because, I mean, just to keep the inflation rates low. Now consider that we are fast approaching election season, and, we really can't afford to have, from a governing party's perspective, you can't afford to be having prices consistently going up. You can't afford for that. So the best thing that they can do now is to tone down the economy and keep the price levels low. And then maybe we can see after election what they will do from there. All right, I think we are done for today. I don't know if you have any other questions.
No, I'm a question asker, but I think I'm fine. This is actually the first time where I finished a class without having network problem. I think I must buy Telkom every time.
Telkom.
No, Telkom network every time, because I'm using Telkom right now.
Okay.
Yes. This was helpful. I think this is fine for today. Let me just absorb this, and then we'll take it from there.
All right.
We'll
Then
take
if
it
there are
from
any other questions, you'll post them in the group there. Yeah?
Yes, I'll just replay it again and just write notes, because now I was just listening without writing anything. And then if there's anything that I have, I will just post it in the group. I'll just
All
post it. You're really good at this. I'm just hoping by the end I will understand, because I understand nothing of economics. I overthink it, so it ends up confusing me.
You'll be fine, don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Bye.